the most powerful man in the world, abandoned Rome and locked himself away on a private island. What he did there became so disturbing that even Roman historians struggled to describe it, but how much of it was true? And how much was propaganda? Chapter 1. The Emperor Who Disappeared. Imagine ruling the largest empire the world had ever seen, and then vanishing from its heart. In the year 26 AD, Emperor Tiberius, the successor of Augustus and ruler of Rome's vast dominion from Spain to Syria, made a decision that stunned the Roman world. He left the capital and withdrew to the small island of Capri, never again returning to Rome during its lifetime. By this point, Tiberius had already ruled for more than a decade. He was not an inexperienced monarch. He was a seasoned military commander, a disciplined administrator, and a man shaped by the harsh realities of imperial politics. Under his leadership, Rome's borders remained secure, and the empire was financially stable. Yet beneath that stability, political tension was steadily rising. Tiberius' relationship with the Roman Senate had become increasingly strained. The atmosphere in Rome was heavy with suspicion, fueled by a growing number of treason trials, known as Maesta's prosecutions, which targeted those accused of disloyalty to the emperor. Fear spread quietly through the political elite. Capri, located off the coast of Campania, was geographically perfect for isolation. Its steep limestone cliffs and limited access made it both a retreat and a fortress. Once a peaceful getaway favored by Augustus, it now became the emperor's permanent residence. From Capri, Tiberius continued to rule through written orders, messengers, and trusted officials, most notably Lucius alias Sejanus, the powerful commander of the Praetorian Guard. His absence created a dangerous vacuum. An emperor was expected to be seen, to lead publicly, to embody Rome itself. Instead, Tiberius ruled from afar. And in that distance, rumors multiplied. And the shadow of Capri began to grow into one of the most unsettling mysteries of Roman imperial history. Chapter 2. Capri. The island that became a prison. Capri was not a distant exile in the traditional sense. It was, on the surface, a place of beauty. The island lies in the Bay of Naples, a rugged mass of rock sharply from the Mediterranean. Its cliffs are steep, its shoreline difficult to access, and its interior marked by narrow paths and high vantage points. In the Roman world, Capri had long been known as an exclusive retreat. Emperor Augustus himself had favored it, building villas there as a private escape from the pressures of Rome. But when Tiberius arrived in 26 AD, the island's meaning changed completely. Capri became more than a residence. It became a controlled environment, physically isolated from the capital, yet still close enough for the emperor to maintain authority. With limited entry points and natural barriers, Capri offered something Rome could not: separation. Tiberius established himself in a network of imperial villas, the most famous being Villa Jovis, built high on the eastern cliffs. From this elevated position, the emperor could look out across the sea, while remaining unreachable to most of the empire. Capri's geography provided security, but also secrecy. Those who visited did so under strict conditions. Capri was small, contained, and watched. Ancient sources suggest that access was carefully managed, and that the emperor's inner circle was tightly controlled. Unlike Rome, where senators, crowds, and political rivals were unavoidable, Capri allowed Tiberius to rule on his own terms. The island became a place where imperial power was concentrated in private, away from public scrutiny. Decisions affecting millions could now be made behind closed doors, carried back to Rome only through letters and emissaries. To some, Capri was a paradise. To others, it was something else entirely, a fortress of isolation, where the emperor's distance from Rome began to feel less like retirement and more like imprisonment, for both ruler and empire. Chapter 3. A mind rotting with power and paranoia. Tiberius did not withdraw to Capri because the empire was collapsing. Rome was strong. Its armies held the frontiers, its provinces delivered wealth, and its institutions still functioned. His retreat was not a military necessity, it was personal. By the time he left Rome in 26 AD, Tiberius was already a man shaped by decades of political trauma. He had spent much of his life under the shadow of Augustus, never fully secure in his position. His rise to power was complicated by forced marriages, family deaths, and the constant awareness that imperial favor could vanish overnight. Ancient historians describe a ruler who became increasingly suspicious of those around him. The early years of his reign had been relatively restrained, but over time, fear of betrayal began to dominate imperial politics. The use of maestas trials expanded, and accusations of disloyalty became weapons in the Senate. Capri offered Tiberius distance, but distance did not bring peace. Instead, isolation deepened the emperor's mistrust. Away from Rome's public life, he relied more heavily on reports, informers, and intermediaries. The farther he removed himself from the capital, the more the empire was filtered through whispers and suspicion. Tacitus portrays this period as one in which Tiberius became increasingly withdrawn, not only physically, but psychologically, a ruler consumed by the belief that enemies surrounded him. Whether Tacitus exaggerates or not, the political consequences were real. Rome became a place where elite families feared denunciation, and where loyalty was never certain. Power, when separated from accountability, can turn inward. Capri became a space where the emperor's authority was absolute, but also where his world narrowed. The ruler of the Mediterranean now lived surrounded by cliffs and sea, cut off from the human rhythms of the capital. And as the emperor's circle tightened, paranoia did not fade. It hardened into a system, one that would soon reshape Rome itself. Chapter 4. The Court of Whispers and Hidden Informers. Even in isolation, Tiberius was never truly alone. Capri may have removed him from the crowds of Rome, but it did not remove him from politics. Instead, the emperor's rule entered a quieter, more secretive phase, one shaped by intermediaries, private correspondence, and an atmosphere of constant surveillance. From the island, Tiberius governed largely through letters. Imperial decisions were dispatched across the sea, to the Senate, to provincial governors, and to military commanders. Rome still obeyed, but the emperor's physical absence changed the nature of power. Authority now came from unseen commands, not public presence. This distance created opportunity and danger. At the center of this new system stood Lucius alias Sejanus, the ambitious commander of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus controlled Rome's military security and became the emperor's most trusted agent in the capital. With Tiberius removed from daily affairs, Sejanus gained enormous influence, acting as the emperor's eyes and ears. Ancient sources suggest that Capri became a place where information was tightly controlled. Those who approached the emperor did so through layers of access. Reports, accusations, and rumors traveled constantly between the island and Rome. Informers, delatores, played an increasing role in imperial politics, feeding the climate of fear that surrounded the treason trials. In Rome, senators could not be sure what the emperor knew. As Tiberius remained on Capri year after year, stories began to circulate. First quietly, then with intensity. The most sensational accounts come from Suetonius, writing nearly a century later, and from Tacitus, whose histories portray the later years of Tiberius' reign in dark tones. According to Suetonius, Capri became a place of extreme indulgence and moral corruption. He describes elaborate villas, private chambers, and acts of sexual excess that he claims shocked even Roman standards. He alleges cruelty, exploitation, and bizarre displays of power. Yet historians today approach these claims with caution. Suetonius wrote under later emperors, long after Tiberius' death in 37 AD. His biographies often blended documented fact with rumor and scandal, reflecting both popular gossip and political bias. Tacitus, while more analytical, was deeply critical of imperial autocracy, and may have emphasized the moral decline of rulers to illustrate broader themes about corruption. What can be confirmed is that Capri was heavily restricted. Access to the emperor was controlled, political enemies were punished, treason trials increased in frequency during the later years of his reign. Senators and equestrians were executed or exiled on charges that were sometimes vague or politically motivated. The island's isolation allowed Tiberius to operate without immediate public scrutiny. Whether or not every lurid detail is true, the essential reality remains. Capri symbolized a shift in how imperial power was exercised. Decisions were made privately, punishments were severe, fear was real, the rumors themselves became part of the emperor's legacy. In Rome, perception mattered as much as fact. An emperor who hid from public view invited suspicion. Silence allowed imagination to fill the gaps. By the time of his death, Tiberius was no longer remembered primarily as Augustus' capable successor. He had become something darker in the Roman memory, a ruler whose retreat into isolation blurred the line between history and legend. Chapter 6: The Cliff of Death. Executions on the edge of paradise. Among the most chilling images associated with Tiberius Capri is not a palace or a banquet hall, but the island's cliffs. Capri rises sharply from the sea, its limestone edges forming steep drops into the water below. Ancient writers claimed that these natural boundaries became part of the emperor's machinery of punishment. Suetonius reports that prisoners and condemned individuals were sometimes thrown from high points on the island, their deaths staged as both execution and spectacle. The most famous location linked to these stories is Villa Jovis, Tiberius' principal residence, built near the eastern edge of Capri. From its heights, the emperor could oversee the sea routes, but the villa's position also fed later accounts of cruelty. Suetonius suggests that those sentenced to death were cast from the cliffs, and, if they survived the fall, were finished off by waiting sailors below. Modern historians cannot verify every detail of these reports. The sources are hostile, written long after the events, and shaped by the Roman tradition of portraying unpopular rulers as monstrous. Yet executions and political killings during Tiberius' later reign are not in doubt. Tacitus records numerous senators and elites condemned through treason accusations, many of them forced into suicide or removed through exile and death. What Capri represented was the emperor's distance from Rome's legal visibility. In the capital, punishment was public, debated, and performed before institutions. On Capri, justice became private. Whether the cliff executions occurred exactly as described or became exaggerated legend, the symbolism endured, an emperor ruling from a beautiful island while death and fear lingered at its edges. In Roman memory, Capri was no longer simply a retreat. It became a place where imperial power felt absolute, and where mercy seemed dangerously far away. Chapter 7: Rome without a ruler. Chaos in the capital. While Tiberius watched from Capri, Rome continued to function, but uneasily. The emperor's absence did not mean the empire lacked authority. His orders still arrived, written in carefully composed letters, read aloud in the Senate. Laws were still passed, governors still obeyed, but the political balance in the capital shifted dramatically. With Tiberius removed from public life after 26 AD, power increasingly concentrated in the hands of those closest to him, especially Sejanus, commander of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus had already strengthened his position by consolidating the guard into a single camp outside Rome, giving him unmatched control over the city's military force. Tacitus describes these years as a period when Sejanus became almost a second ruler. Senators sought his favor, rival families feared his reach. Accusations of treason multiplied, often tied to personal vendettas or political ambition. The emperor, far away, depended on reports, and Sejanus shaped what was seen and what was hidden. In 31 AD, Sejanus' rise ended suddenly. Tiberius, after years of trust, turned against him. Through a carefully planned sequence of letters sent to the Senate, the emperor orchestrated Sejanus' arrest and execution. The fall was brutal and immediate. Sejanus was condemned, killed, and his supporters were hunted down. The aftermath unleashed even more terror. Rome entered a new wave of purges, as suspected conspirators were eliminated. The Senate, already anxious, became increasingly submissive, unsure of where suspicion might fall next. Rome without an emperor's presence became Rome ruled by uncertainty. The empire was stable in its borders, but unstable at its core. Governed from an island, filtered through intermediaries, and haunted by the knowledge that imperial power could strike without warning. Capri was distant, but its shadow reached all the way into the heart of Rome. Chapter 8. Was he a monster, or a man made into one? By the time the ruler's reign entered its final years, his reputation had already begun to darken. Ancient historians portrayed him as withdrawn, bitter, and increasingly cruel. Yet the question remains, was the ruler always destined to rule in fear? Or did circumstances shape the ruler he became? Before he was emperor, the ruler had been a disciplined military commander. He led campaigns in Germany and Pannonia, secured fragile frontiers, and demonstrated administrative competence. Augustus trusted him enough to name him successor in 14 AD. His early reign was cautious, even restrained. He initially resisted excessive honors and appeared reluctant to assume absolute power. But Tiberius' personal life had been marked by loss and political sacrifice. He was compelled by Augustus to divorce his first wife, Vipsania, whom he reportedly loved, in order to marry Julia, Augustus' daughter. That marriage failed publicly and painfully. Later, the deaths of his son Drusus in 23 AD and of his brother and allies deepened his isolation. Trust became rare in a world defined by ambition. The Roman imperial system itself offered few safeguards. Power was centralized in one individual, and loyalty was often motivated by fear or advantage. The treason trials of his later years, though harsh, operated within a legal framework that had existed under Augustus. Tiberius expanded its use, but he did not invent it. Modern historians debate the accuracy of the most extreme accusations against him. Tacitus and Suetonius wrote with moral agendas and political distance. Their portraits may reflect both genuine excesses and the Roman tendency to vilify rulers who ruled from the shadows. Tiberius was neither a simple tyrant nor an innocent victim of propaganda. He was a ruler shaped by immense authority, personal grief, political betrayal, and the structure of an empire that concentrated power without restraint. History remembers extremes, but reality is often more complicated than legend. Chapter 9. The Emperor's Final Days on the Island. By the mid-30s AD, Tiberius was an old man. Ruling an empire he no longer wished to face directly. He remained on Capri, increasingly distant from Rome, while the machinery of government continued in his name. The island, once chosen for retreat and control, had become the setting of his final isolation. Ancient sources describe a ruler physically weakened, surrounded by a shrinking circle of attendants and officials. Tiberius was now in his 70s. His reign, which began in 14 AD, had lasted more than 2 decades. The political purges following Sejanus' fall had left Rome's elite fearful and exhausted. The Senate obeyed, but without confidence. The imperial system endured, but it carried deep scars. In 37 AD, Tiberius' health collapsed. Tacitus reports conflicting rumors about his death. Some claimed he died naturally at Misenum, on the mainland near Naples, while others suggested he was smothered or hastened toward death by those eager for succession. These accounts cannot be confirmed with certainty, but they reflect the atmosphere of suspicion that surrounded his final years. What is clear is that the question of succession loomed over his last days. 2 figures stood closest: Caligula, the son of Germanicus, and Tiberius' grandson Tiberius Gemellus. Ultimately, Caligula would emerge as emperor, supported by the Praetorian Guard. Tiberius died on March 16, 37 AD, ending one of Rome's most complex and unsettling reigns. He left behind an empire still powerful, but politically fractured, and a legacy inseparable from the island where he chose to disappear. Capri did not merely witness his retirement. It became the place where his rule slowly narrowed into silence, fear, and final decline. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Capri: Truth, Myth, and Warning. Capri did not die with Tiberius. Long after his death in 37 AD, the island remained fixed in Roman memory. As more than a geographic retreat, it became a symbol of what happens when imperial power withdraws from public life and becomes hidden behind distance, secrecy, and fear. Tiberius' reign was not a simple story of incompetence or collapse. The empire remained stable, its borders held, its administration functioned. Yet politically, the later years of his rule were defined by mistrust, purges, and the expanding use of treason accusations. The emperor's absence from Rome allowed intermediaries like Sejanus to gain enormous influence, and it left the Senate uncertain, submissive, and vulnerable. Much of what later generations believed about Capri comes from writers such as Tacitus and Suetonius, who shaped Tiberius into a darker figure, a ruler whose isolation bred cruelty and excess. Modern historians recognize that some accounts may be exaggerated, reflecting Roman moral judgment and political bias. Yet even exaggeration reveals something real. The anxiety created when the emperor became unreachable. Capri represents the dangerous transformation of authority into something private. In Rome, emperors were meant to embody the state before the people. Tiberius chose instead to rule from behind walls, letters, and silence. That decision created space for rumor, fear, and myth, but also for real political violence. His legacy is therefore devoid, part historical reality, part distorted memory. But both point toward the same warning: when power becomes isolated, when accountability disappears, and when no one can speak freely to the ruler, even the strongest empire can be governed by suspicion. Capri was beautiful, but history remembers it as a reminder. Unchecked authority, hidden from view, always leaves a shadow behind. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden darkness of Roman power, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because history is full of stories far stranger than fiction. And we're just getting started.